1, 2, 3. As long as I can draw breath, I will fight for what is right. I will never stop until justice is done. 1, 2, 3. I will always be one step behind him, like a ghost, letting him know I will never stop until I get justice. 1, 2, 3. 1 is what I wanted. 2 is what I prayed for. 3 is impossible. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. That was me being shouty, man. Rubbish. It was so bad. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Sorry about that awful attempt at being shouty, man. That was a request. I think all I succeeded in doing was actually giving Alfie a fright. He's just suddenly got up and was like, what's going on here? Why is there shouting? Okay, before I get to the story, a couple of very quick shout-outs. Hello to Julie Larnach in Australia. Hello, Julie. Now, Julie pointed out something to me I completely missed. In the Isadora Duncan episode, I think I said something about 1989, which is clearly ridiculous. So, thanks, Julie. Oddly, the story tonight takes place in 1989. Must be some kind of fate. Siobhan McClatchy, cheers for sending a story my way. And finally, Janet Lydia. I hope it's Lydia. Anyway, Janet, thank you for getting in touch. Okay, this week's story. Wowzers. Wowzers, said no one ever since the 1990s. This story is completely bonkers. Sorry, I don't know what is going on with my 90s vernacular. I don't know why I'm using words like wowzers and bonkers. God, I sound like something out of that, what was it, Bill and Fred's Bogus Journey? Right, I'll try and stop that, or everything's going to end up being awesome, and I'll be saying, what's up, in a minute. Good God. Okay, I'll try and get back to my usual patterns of speech. Alright, why I got into this story, this subject in this episode. What is it? It's Double Jeopardy. Now, lots of you will know what Double Jeopardy is from true crime podcasts, or just from life, or seeing it on the news. Big cases. There's been huge cases of Double Jeopardy in the world that have played out on the world stage. In a nutshell, it is this. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime. If you're found innocent in the eyes of the law, then you're innocent. Should new evidence come forward, then it just becomes a big legal mess and a complete and utter messy situation. So the team who got you off will say, well, you know, it's not good enough to have new evidence. The other side will say, well, this time we can prove it. But The rule is you can't be tried twice for the same crime. Now, every country has its own double jeopardy laws and rules, and this story takes place in the UK. So, buckle in for a crazy story here. This case rewrote history in the British legal system. Here's a task for you during this story. I'd like you to do a mental count of how many times you say or think, "What?" or "What the actual fuck?" or "Oh my god, that is insane." I'll bet you say this a good few times. I certainly did when I got deep into the research. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Okay, who do we need to know in this story? We need to know Julie Hogg and her parents, Anne and Charlie. We are in Tyneside in England, and it's 1989. So Julie Hogg is 22 years old. She is a mother to a 3-year-old son called Kevin. Julie is described as bubbly, funny, caring. She could sometimes be quiet, sometimes quite introvert. Julie was incredibly close to her family, especially her mum. Her and her mum, they would speak on the phone 3-4 times a day, sometimes about nothing, just to chat, just to connect. Julie was living with just her and 3-year-old Kevin. Now, how she got here was that she'd actually married a man called David when she was 19 years old. And after only a couple of years, they'd had a child, and the marriage started to dissolve. So they're going through like legal proceedings to divide the house and the money and decide where the 3-year-old Kevin should live. It was decided that during all of those legal proceedings at the time, Kevin would stay with Julie. So to make money, which she absolutely desperately needed, Julie did a variety of different jobs, and one of them was pizza delivery. So she'd work around the local area, and it often meant for Julie that she would be working into the late hours of the night. So she'd be working till 2-3 in the morning delivering pizzas. And in situations where she knew she was going to be working late, her son would go and stay with his grandparents, Julie's mum and dad. So one evening, Julie drops 3-year-old Kevin off with Anne and Charlie, her mum and dad, and she says, "Okay, right, I'm off to deliver pizzas for the next few hours, and I will collect Kevin at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning and get him to nursery." So the next morning arrives. It's 7:30 in the morning, and Anne, Julie's mum, calls Julie's house. Now, she calls and there's no answer on the phone. And she thinks, okay, well, possibly she's just exhausted from working, so she's in sort of deep sleep. So she tries calling another couple of times, and she doesn't get an answer. This is really odd, she thinks. She thinks, okay, sleeping through 1-2 phone calls, that's fine, but she's now slept through about 5 or 6 different phone calls. So what Anne does is she takes Kevin, she gets him ready, and they walk down to Julie's house. And when she gets there, the doors are locked, the windows are closed, and all she can really do at this point is shout through the letterbox. I mean, yes, it's 1989. Mobile phones weren't really a thing. So she's really got no option other than to just shout through the letterbox. She's thinking, okay, Julie must be really knackered and must have gone into a deep, deep sleep. After 10 minutes of knocking the door, her mum starts to get really concerned. And she's got that parental vibe where, parents know instantly that something isn't sitting correctly. And a lot of this story will be driven by Anne and her dad Charlie's parental vibes, where they just know something isn't right. So what does Anne do when she can't get an answer at Julie's house? She goes and she gets Julie's older brother from his work. Now he's big, he's like a big guy, and she gets him to break in the back door of the house because she doesn't know what else to do at this point. She's not getting an answer. I'd probably do the exact same, to be honest with you. I think I'd probably just, break that back door down. So inside, they go in, and what they're expecting to find is Julie asleep in bed. Do they find this? No, she's not there. The house is empty. And what her mum will recollect is that as she walked around the empty house, all she could think about was the fact that the house was oddly tidy. Now, I'm not saying that Julie was an overly messy person, but she was a busy young woman with a 3-year-old. So, hey, it wouldn't be unusual for the beds to be unmade or for toys to be lying around the floor. But no, the house is tidy and it's organised. And I know this sounds odd, but this actually sets her mum off into more of a panic. I mean, to say the house is tidy is a bad sign sounds strange, but yeah, that's how it was. So there's no Julie, and the house is spotless. So the next step, Anne calls the police. She calls to report that she doesn't know where her daughter is. Doesn't know where her 22-year-old daughter might have gone. She'd been out delivering pizzas the night before, and now she can't find her. And police say, well, she's an adult. And to be honest, this isn't even really a missing person yet. This could be anything. They have some crazy theories. They say to Anne, what's happened here is she's gone to a club somewhere. She's gone to a club and she's just, lost track of time. She's gone back to someone's house. Don't worry about it. Anne says, no, that's not Julie. It's not. They say, right, okay, well, fine, let's look at her situation, right? So she's in the middle of divorce proceedings. She's got a young child. They say, I'll tell you what it is. She's had a moment where she's just decided she's going to hitch a ride to London or another town. She's just going to go. That's what she's done. She's just decided that she's going to walk out of her life. And again, her mum and dad are saying, no, these are stupid theories. They're not right. This is not our daughter. So days pass and there is no sign of Julie. Our parents are harassing police. Harassing them to the point where they eventually get listened to. A chief inspector steps in and he says, okay, I will look at this because yes, it is a little bit odd. Again, and it's a good example of them using those parental feelings, those vibes that only a parent can really know about their child. They say to police, we are certain if you're going to find any clue to where she's gone, it's going to be in her house. They explain it's oddly tidy. It's never like that. It's got that kind of, the house has got that sort of feeling where, like, do you know that thing when you walk into a room sometimes and you can tell that there's been an argument in a room? Because you walk in and, like, your senses kind of, I don't know, they pick something up and you go, oh, there's something odd. Or, you walk into a room where people have been talking about you. You know that feeling as well? Yeah, just that kind of thing. They know there's something in the air in that house that is not right. And Anne and Charlie, they can't put their finger on it, but they're certain, they're absolutely certain the house is where police need to be looking. So a team of forensic investigators go to the house and they get to work. For 2 days, they comb the house for any sign, any clue, anything to help what has now officially become a missing persons investigation. So after 2 days, Julie's mum phones the house and asks them, well, have you found anything? And they say, no. Nothing is showing up in this house which can help us. So frustrating. I get the feeling at this point, when I was reading stuff and watching stuff, I get the feeling at this point police are doing things the best that they can. But I think what's really frustrating for her parents is there's a real lack of energy in the approach. I feel like police and forensics are going at this point, yeah, okay, fine, right, whatever. Yeah, we'll search the house. I feel like they're just going through the motions. And sincere apologies to any police officers listening or forensic investigators. I'm not meaning to be mean, I'm not meaning to be horrible. But it was 1989 and I just wonder if it was more, I just think it was more of a go through the motions situation than, okay, we actually actively think something could be wrong here. I'm suspecting in the back of the heads of police officers, they're thinking, she's a young woman, she's a divorcee, she's just fucked off and left, and that's it. She's away for a fresh start. Now, this is where, like, if you don't already love Anne in this story, you're going to end up loving her. She goes to the house where the investigation is happening. She goes to Julie's house and she gets involved. She rolls up her sleeves and she says, right, okay, do you know what? I'm going to help here. You're not turning anything up. And I don't think that can be right. And I love this kind of thing. She starts going round the house and pointing things out that really are coming from a really parent perspective. So, for example, Julie's makeup bag is in the bathroom. And she says, you're not telling me that my daughter has run away to start a new life and left her makeup bag behind, because I'm her mum. I know her inside out. Julie's not going anywhere without a makeup bag. She's so dogmatic. She just keeps at them all the time. She's like, you can look for all the fingerprints that you want. You can try to find hairs. You can do all this. I'm giving you the facts. There's a makeup bag. This house is tidy. You need to listen to me when I'm telling you. I know my daughter inside out. Something is wrong. So the search of the house comes to an end. Police sit down with Julie's parents and they say, we can't promise that she's not come to harm in a place that we've not yet discovered, but we can say with absolute certainty nothing bad happened to Julie in her house. We are certain of that. Julie's house gets locked up. Closed down. Rough. It's just really inconclusive for them as a family. Julie's family decide to start their own search. They go out into fields and into parks, and they go to villages and towns roundabout. They put up flyers. They go to the press. A national TV appeal happens, and it's just heartbreaking. It's horrible. It's Anne, Julie's mum, and Julie's 3-year-old son Kevin asking for Julie to come back. Horrible to see a 3-year-old on TV asking for his mum to come back. 3 full months pass, and there is no sign of Julie. TV appeals haven't worked. A sighting of Julie has never been reported by anyone. So the house, Julie's house, the husband that she was separating from, he decides, well, do you know what? The house can't just lie empty. And now, because of Julie's disappearance, he has custody of 3-year-old Kevin. So he makes plans. He's going to move back into that house. So he goes to the house just to get it ready for him and his son to move into it. And when he gets there, the house has been locked down for 3 months. He puts his key in the door. He opens it. And he is hit by the most awful smell. There is a terrible smell throughout the whole house. He immediately starts contacting people to report this. He calls Julie's parents. He calls his own parents. And no one can understand where the hell is this smell coming from. Anne arrives at the house and the smell hits her hard. She goes up the stairs. She goes into the bathroom, and that's where the smell is the strongest. So she's opening cupboards. She's looking at everything, trying to figure out where it's coming from. Now, as she passes the bath, she touches the bath panel and she realises that should be fixed in place, but it's not. It's moving. Anne runs down to the bottom of the house where everyone else is, and she starts screaming. She's under the bath. She's under the bath. 3-year-old Kevin is screaming his head off. Whoever had murdered Julie had buried her under her own bath in her own house. Whoa, of course, massive shock. The family just can't understand. They have to deal with the fact that Julie's body is in her house, but also the fact that police had been in there for days and not found her. Get this fact: 27 different members of police and forensics were involved in the initial search of that house. 27 people. Fuck me. Not one person spotted that the body was there the entire time. The initial chief inspector who had helped the family learns this information and he says, I wanted to scream my head off. The chief inspector says, the family have the right to be aggrieved by this mistake. Aggrieved? Try fucking raging. Try I'm ready to rip someone's head off levels of rage. Not aggrieved. Aggrieved is a pointless, useless fucking word. Anne says something really interesting at this point, and I think, yeah, it's because, you know, we all, I think, listen to true crime. We all know some brutal stories and we know them and whatever. And Anne says it's so strange at the time when you hear the word murder about someone else, or you hear about serial killers, or you hear about this. But she says when it actually is your world, it's unlike anything else. To know that your daughter has been actually murdered is unlike anything that you'll ever experience. So the newspapers the next day, and again, here's Anne at her best. The newspapers print a story that say, police last night discovered the body of 22-year-old Julie Hogg hidden under her bath at her home. Her corpse had lay there for 3 months. So what does Anne do? She calls the newspaper and she says, I want an apology and I want a very important correction to be made. And it's this. You're saying police found Julie? No, they didn't. I found her. She says, don't be trying to applaud the police at this point. I found my daughter's body. Okay, so what police are now looking at is a murder investigation. And they need to find the person who murdered Julie. They go through various interviews with lots of possible suspects, but they zone in quickly on who can only be called a dickhead of a human being. A man called Billy Dunlop. And it's Billy who this story now becomes about. So who was he? Well, he was a Jack the Lad type in his mid-30s, and he lived in the same area as Julie. He played amateur rugby. He was known around the area in the clubs and in the bars and just in general as a complete pain in the arse, because he would get drunk and just act like a total tool. He was aggressive, he was angry, he was always in fights with someone. However, as is often the way with these guys, and I never understand this, Billy had lots of friends. Yeah, the fucking aggressive guy's got all the mates under the sun. Oh my god. Now, when he wasn't doing his partying and drinking and being aggressive, he could actually come across as quite a nice guy. He could come across as a gentleman. I mean, it's not the case at all. He's not that. His ex-partners would say of him that he was an absolute nightmare to be with. He was always drunk and always looking for a fight. He belonged to something called, oh my god, the Crazy Gang. What a great name. You know, a group of guys who like to get drunk, create havoc, and get into fights and all that sort of lads behaviour, yeah? So he'd been really violent to previous partners. You know, he'd turned on them with knives. Ex-girlfriends had black eyes. Now, Billy's dad, who is a Glaswegian man, admits that Billy had been in in and out of trouble his whole life. And he'd been in and out of the care system his whole entire life. So now police, whether it's pressure, I don't know, or whether they just believe it to be Billy, they arrest Billy Dunlop for the murder of Julie Hogg. Now a lot of doubt surrounds this arrest. Was he the right man? What evidence did police have? Well, they'd found a set of keys that were the keys to Julie's house under Billy's floorboards. There was evidence of semen in Julie's house, and as good as 1989 testing of semen was, they thought it was likely it was Billy Dunlop's. So Billy Dunlop awaits a trial. In the meantime, Julie's family have to go through what no parent ever wants to go through. They have to bury Julie. It's a really horrible moment. Oh, it's horrible. In an interview, her dad talks about the day that her funeral arrived. And he says, I went to the coffin. And he says, to the coffin, I will get the bastard who did this to you. So remembering that there's also 3-year-old Kevin, Julie's son, at this point. The family, they have to come up with something to tell him. And what they decide on is they decide to tell him that his mum had slipped in the bath and that now she was in heaven. And of course, at 3 years old, Kevin believed this. But over the next few years, he was about to see the truth about his mother's death play out publicly, because this was about to be a case like no other. This case is about to change British law forever. The trial arrives and Billy Dunlop is facing the court, charged with Julie's murder. Julie's mother is called as a witness in court to talk about Julie and describe the wonderful person that this 22-year-old was. Her dad, Charlie, he sits in the court 4 feet away from Billy Dunlop, and he says he is amazed that during that court case he didn't reach out and kill him. So right now, this is where the whole courts come into play and the things get very complicated. Rather than focus on the man who had her house keys hidden under his floorboards, the case becomes about Julie and her sex life. It's brought up so many times in court that when Julie had separated from her husband, she'd been sexually involved with a few different guys. So what? She's not married. I mean, she's working hard to earn her own money. She's raising her son. Oh, go to fuck. So she wants to go out and have some sex. Who cares? Well, I'll tell you who does actually care is Billy Dunlop's defence. Because they use that fact in court to make Julie sound promiscuous. Julie had had sex with Billy a month before she disappeared. So he did know her. They'd had sex. He had come round to her house one night and they slept together. So the defence will immediately say, Well, that's why his fingerprints are on her keys. And that's why you found semen in the house. It's from that night. Now, the prosecution, they'll argue, look, regardless of whether or not these two had sex or not, he's still the prime suspect, and here's why. 4 days before Julie had gone missing, Billy Dunlop asked her for sex and she said no. How do we know this? Because Julie's best friend testified in court. She said that Julie said, yeah, okay, I slept with Billy before, but he gives me an odd feeling. He's strange. And I don't think that having sex with him is something I want to do again. Now this guy, Billy, a proper, well, what I would call in Glasgow a Raj, was not the kind of guy to accept being refused sex. So the theory building in court is that Billy had become so angry by Julie's refusal of sex that he had gone to her home and killed her. Now here's where this case frustrates me, as it will you. Do you remember I said Billy Dunlop outwardly looked and seemed like a nice guy? Well, that is exactly what happened in court. The jury are looking at him and they're thinking, we're hearing all of this, but he also looks like quite a nice guy. And this is also just so frustrating. Julie's body was so badly decomposed that no actual cause of death could be found. So this means the prosecution, right, are having to kind of not invent, but they're having to generate some ideas around how she might have been killed. So you smothered her is one of the ideas. You strangled her is another. But you know, all it really does is weaken the case, because they can't actually tell from the body how she died. It just weakens their case in court. So between having to essentially guess at how she was murdered and him coming across as a nice guy, the case isn't looking very good for the prosecution, and Julie's family, they really begin to worry. They start to think, what if this man actually gets away with it? So the case comes to its conclusion, and the prosecution, they think they've done their job. They are convinced the jury will find Billy Dunlop guilty. The jury deliberate for an entire evening, and in the morning they return with their verdict. And it's devastating. They cannot reach a decision, and the case is stopped there and then. Julie's family are devastated. Billy Dunlop, well, he's delighted. Essentially, he's confused the jury enough to find him not guilty, and he's to be acquitted. So the judge in this case, now he's a savvy man, he's smart. He calls for an immediate retrial of Billy. So this is where this whole double jeopardy business comes into play, and yeah, this really gets my fascination going. After some extensive research, I've realised that in a case like this, a judge is allowed to say, no, I think we need a retrial if it comes under the Serious Crimes Act. And it's basically the courts saying, because no conclusion was reached, we need to find a conclusion. And the rules are this. The same people must appear in court, and it must be the same evidence, same witnesses, and of course, a different jury, a jury who will this time reach a conclusion. Anne says this was brutal. Having to sit and go through an entire trial again. The same trial, same evidence, same practices of trying to drag Julie's name through the mud. What did Billy learn, do you think, in his first trial? Well, he learned how to appear like a nice guy. And so, trial 2 ends. So the new jury, off they go. They deliberate. They arrive at their decision. They come back with a verdict. And, once more, it's inconclusive. A second jury couldn't agree that Billy Dunlop was guilty. He is formally acquitted and set free. He is a free man. Legally, in the eyes of the law, he's not guilty of this crime. So although it's been tried twice, it counts as once in the eyes of the court. But Billy Dunlop can never be retried again for the murder of Julie. And he fucking knew it. So what does Billy do next? Well, bold as you like, he goes on TV. And he urges police to find Julie's killer. He plays the victim. Oh, it's so frustrating to watch. He says, I've been through hell in this court. I've been through absolute hell. I've been called a murderer and a brute and I'm none of these things. A newspaper come to him and they say, here is a lot of money if you will appear in the newspaper and project yourself as the victim. Ugh. So, in his home life, Billy has a partner. And when she hears that Billy is free from court, that he's been acquitted, how does she feel? Is it joy? Happiness? No. It's fear. She has lived with Billy for years, and he has been abusive, and he has attacked her on so many occasions. Within a few weeks of being out, Billy does the thing which makes my blood boil, and I'm sure it will yours. He begins boasting that he got away with the murder of Julie Hogg. One night in an argument with his partner, he grabs her by the throat, he pushes her up against the wall, and he says, I will kill you. I've done it before, and I've gotten away with it. Oh, man. What? So, various people are calling police, and they're saying, look, just heard Billy Dunlop confess to the murder. And police are saying, well, under double jeopardy, there's nothing we can do. He's been acquitted by a jury twice. I'm afraid we can't do anything. I would be going out of my mind at this point. If I was a family member, I would be losing my fucking mind all over the place. Billy Dunlop's partner, the one he had just thrown against the wall, she'd had enough. She couldn't cope, and she ran away. I mean, essentially, she's got to be thinking, I'll be next. I'm going to be next in this situation. He's going to kill me next. I'm just in shock at this point that a man is walking about openly telling people that he's guilty. He's actually, sitting in pubs boasting to people. Yeah, I killed her. Yeah, it was me. I killed her. Put her under the bath. Yeah, but they can't do anything about it because, I've been found The courts can't find me guilty. So, has Billy learned anything about violence or how to control his temper? No, not a thing. He's in a pub one evening and he sees an ex-girlfriend. Now I'm talking an ex-girlfriend from years ago. Years and years and years ago. And she's got a new boyfriend. Okay, fair enough. she's an old ex. You can't be raging that your ex from 5-6 years ago has a new boyfriend. But Billy is. He goes crazy. And he attacks her right there in the pub, punching her and throwing her about. This is what he does the next day. He breaks in to the house of this same ex-girlfriend and he stabs her with a barbecue skewer and he hits the new boyfriend with a baseball bat. Man, should this guy be walking free around the place? I fucking think not. Now, the ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend, they have suffered some injuries from him, but they're both alive. So police are called and he's charged with, at first, attempted murder. I think it later becomes assault. Now it's while he's in prison for this attack that Billy's about to learn that going around boasting that you have gotten away with a murder is going to come back and bite you in the arse. He tells a police officer in prison that he killed Julie Hogg, he strangled her, and he buried her, and then he laughs at the fact there is nothing anyone can do about it. Or, at least, that's what he thinks. The fact that he is confessing and boasting, it winds police up really badly. The police in this case are still embarrassed by their failure at not finding Julie's body. It's really haunting them that they never discovered her body. So this confession, or this boast from Billy, it starts a chain of events. It begins some really serious discussions in the legal system about double jeopardy. Why it exists and should it exist, and does an 800-year-old law have a relevant place now? I mean, that's major that these conversations are even happening, because previously they weren't. But now people are starting to have these meetings and conversations and asking, should we be relooking at double jeopardy? So police are going to need a recorded, if anything is going to happen, police need a recorded confession from Billy. So this is what they do. They put a wire on a female police officer and she poses as a prison guard. And so she goes into the prison and she kind of gets to know Billy as a guard. They start chatting. She's wearing a wire the whole time. And in 60 hours of recording, he confesses to the undercover officer that he thinks is just a prison guard about killing Julie. He says he went to her house that night for sex and she refused. He says he got angry and he strangled her. He explains that just before she died, he raped her and then he put her body under the bath. He explains that he then tidied the house and left. So with this confession on tape, he goes to court. Now, it's double jeopardy. Can Billy be tried again for the murder of Julie? No. So all that they can do is try him for perjury. I mean, that doesn't equal murder. Come on. Oh, during the perjury case, where they say, you sat in this court during a murder trial and you just lied. You basically lied to us. He admits, he says, yeah, I did. I lied. Because he's such a cocky bastard at this point, who's like, yeah, I'll admit I lied, but you cannot try me again for murder. Even though I'm practically going around the streets with a fucking megaphone shouting from the top of his voice, yes, I killed her. Yes, I did this. He is arrogant enough, fucking thick enough to believe that the law won't find a way to convict him of it. He's so convinced of the fact that he's like, well, I've been acquitted. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get me for this one. During the perjury case, Julie's son is now 13 and he sits in court and he watches this whole thing where Billy Dunlop is tried for perjury. No 13-year-old should ever have to go through that. Out in the world, Julie's parents, Anne and Charlie, are driving a campaign and they are making it their life work to get the double jeopardy law changed. Now, as you can imagine, changing a law or reviewing it after 800 years, it's not a fast process. It takes 15 years of debates, meetings, protests, campaigns and reviews to finally reach the conclusion in England that yes, a change does need to happen. Anne and Charlie, they go on radio, they go on TV, and I have to say, Anne is brilliant in these situations. You know, she sits down with the biggest lawyers in the UK. She sits down with, you know, people who are the strongest legal minds of the UK, and she just goes for them. She's so direct. She just keeps coming back to this thing of going, yeah, you can say, no, you can't be retried, you can give me all of that stuff. But basically her bottom line is, and no one can ever argue with this, her bottom line constantly is, have you found your daughter buried under a bath and then had to live with a man walking about telling everyone that he did it? Have you? And of course, all that these lawyers can ever say is, no, we've never had that. And she goes, well, that's fine. That's the end of the discussion. Because until something changes, like, that's it. That is the fucking bottom line. Good on Anne. Love her. And Charlie. So, Julie's parents, they're actually eventually heard by the UK Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair. They speak to him about the need for change. Now, after years of campaigning for this, they're told that it looks like a change will happen in the future. So meanwhile, in prison, what's Billy up to? Well, Billy's behaving himself, and it looks like in a year or so he might be a free man. But it's while Billy Dunlop is in prison that all of the campaigning and all of those discussions finally comes to a conclusion. Double jeopardy is reviewed, and it's announced that indeed you can be tried again for the same crime. So, for the third time in the case of Julie Hogg, a court case happens. And this time, the jury, they don't get it wrong. Billy Dunlop is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Julie Hogg, all of the fighting, all of the meetings, the conversations, the discussions, the battle to get justice for Julie has worked. And it's such a seismic change, but the law has actually shifted. It's been moved, and that is in such a large part down to Anne and Charlie, who just would not let this go, who just would never rest until they could see Billy Dunlop tried again for this crime. And it's unbelievable, but it actually did work. It actually changed. Anne, Charlie and Kevin, they stand in the courtroom and they watch the man that they have always known was responsible for the death of their daughter be taken to prison. And so ends the story of Julie Hogg and Double Jeopardy. Okay, yeah, wow. Wowzers. I say it ends the story. I mean, of course, if your daughter, your mother, has been murdered in this way, the story never ends. But hey, it's the end of what I've got to say about this. If you go out and you do any research of this on your own, you're likely to find a lot of stories. I didn't really enjoy reading them, if I'm honest with you. I found them quite tough. But basically, Kevin, Julie's son, yeah, he had a lot of problems later on in his life. There was compensation given to the entire family for all of the failings in Julie's case. And he received, I think I read, he received £100,000. And basically he just went a bit crazy with it. He started overspending. He got himself into debt. To get himself out of that, it turned into a bit of theft. He was caught to be scamming money off of some older people. He was, at one point, there's a report that says he was spending upwards of £500 a day on clothing, and he liked to drive about in limousines. And yeah, he eventually actually went to prison, I think, for 21 months for theft of money. That's a whole other story, and I'm not going to judge Kevin here because I don't know the facts of it really. I know what he went through in his mother's story, but I don't really know what his life outside of that involved. But just if you were to go and do any research, you'll probably come across that, and he's quite vilified by the press. He's quite vilified. So yeah. But anyway, there's never a positive in, a murder. There's never a positive in these stories, but there kind of is here, in that actually this case shook British law enough to make a change. And that's why, you can say things like, Julie didn't die in vain. Yes, she did die in vain. She never needed to die. But I am so happy that this law was changed. And her mum and dad will always say, you know what, the real life sentence is actually for us, because we lost our daughter in the most horrific way. But I am delighted that Double Jeopardy has shifted in England. Not in Scotland, I have to say. Now, oh my God, Scottish law, that would be a whole other bloody episode that would probably be about 5 hours long. Scottish law is so complicated. It's the most complicated in the world. Now, apparently Scotland gave the world a lot of its early foundations of law, which other countries have then just taken on and changed and done things and modified for their own countries. Scottish law is a mind bender. I don't even pretend to have my head wrapped around it at the moment. Okay, I'm going to end there. I hope you enjoyed this story. So if you want to get in touch, you can. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Just look for Extraordinary Stories Podcast. I'm on Facebook. There's the Facebook group. Wonderful, growing, healthy and strong all the time. If you want to support the podcast, I'm on Patreon. Just look for Extraordinary Stories Podcast. And if you want to get in touch, I have an email address, and it's extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. So, until the next Short Stories episode, I hope that you stay well. Okay. Goodbye. That was me being shouty, man. Rubbish. It was so bad.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.